Welcome to everyone. As I just want to say on behalf of the YWCA of the City of New York, we're elated to be hosting this Inauguration Day panel. This is just an amazing day in our nation's history. And for me personally, I'm excited about the changes that are ahead. And to quote our new president, Joseph R. Biden, he said, "This is America's day. This is democracy's day, a day of history, of hope, of renewal and resolve." And today, so many firsts happened with the first woman, Kamala Harris, as vice president, as well as her being the first African American and Indian American. And it's about time, but we're here today in 2021. And I want to just say how with the YW, where our mission is to eliminate racism and empower women, that we have high hopes for what lies ahead. And I want to thank all the panelists and the young women who will be speaking today and sharing their thoughts of what lies ahead. And I want to give a special shout out to Van Paget Page, who's our Senior Director of Girls Initiatives, for putting this together with Siobhan Marshall-Wells and Meredith Gray, with help from Emily Palmer and others on the YW team. And we just really appreciate you. And I look forward to hearing more from everyone participating. So thank you for joining. And Paige, it's all yours.
Sorry about that. All right, there we go. Okay, so hi everyone, former folks, new folks. Like Maureen said, my name is Paige, or Van Page, everyone calls me Paige, and I am the Senior Director of the Girls Initiatives for the YWNYC. So I'll talk to you a little bit about what we do here at Girls Initiatives and why we're here today. So we're here today because Girls Initiatives has designed and implemented a racial and gender equity agenda to address the perils of COVID-19 and vicarious exposure to extreme police brutality. So when we're having these conversations in Girls Initiatives, a lot of times we're talking about social justice. At the same time, we're impacted by oppression. So the Year for Now agenda addresses these shortcomings in society as it impacts us as staff and our young people as participants. And we do so by providing these services that are listed on the screen. So in recognizing that our youth change agents are thriving as they are striving, we also are keeping an eye out for issues in terms of access to meeting vital needs, including food, clothing, and personal care items. You can switch the slide. So a little bit about Girls Initiatives. We started in 2014 with our signature event, our Potential to Power Girls Symposium. And this event, before it was our signature event, it was just a day-long symposium that connected young people from across the city with femme leaders from across the city to build this community that we recognized at the time in 2014 was extremely vital. Since then, Girls Initiatives has grown and developed several programs that you see on the right hand of the screen. And in these programs, we are focusing on core themes. So social justice education, talking about these issues, learning how to identify and address oppression, and the way it manifests in our daily lives. And through that, we are working towards racial and gender equity. And because we're working with fabulous young people who are on the call today, we're also focusing on personal development. So in these programs, When we're talking about social justice, Siobhan and I are very dedicated to creating intergenerational spaces. So young folks can see, beyond Siobhan and I and YW staff, that there are folks that are creating careers and changing the world every day. And this is based on their personal passions and based on their experiences in society. So a lot of times we open up our sessions like we're doing today. And today is our Amplifying Multiple Perspectives program. So that is why we're here today. And that's our hopes for the panel as we all combine to celebrate such a historic occasion for our new presidential administration. So with that, we'll get started, and I will pass the mic to our moderator for today, Jaleesa Beavers. And Jaleesa is the CEO of Forward Inclusion Consulting.
Okay, thank you for that, and welcome to our Inauguration Day panel. Thank you to everyone that's already said, how were you feeling after the Inauguration Day, right? How are you feeling today? So it was great to see many of your chats in the panel. All right. So we are actually, I'm flipping back and forth, and I'm going to move you all over because you can see my screen, and I also want you to see what I'm displaying, okay? So today's panel discussion is a part of the racial and equity gender work that the YW New York City does. This is an intergenerational event that's connecting the Girls Initiative participants, as Paige mentioned, from the AMP and from all of the other programs that are happening right now, and New York City women leaders for a discussion to unpack and reflect on current events and critically explore the significance of the Biden and Harris administration. Today, we have 7 panelists that we're going to be hearing and learning from and learning alongside, right? So in our agenda for today, you may usually expect an agenda to say, we're going to be grounded in intention that does such and such and such, right? Or we're going to understand and implement the year of now and our theme for such and such and such. But that's not what you see on the screen today. What you see on the screen today is we're going to ground in intention, right? So we're going to be starting our session off with the same way that we're ending and concluding our time today with some breath work, right? So we're going to take some deep breaths. Let's just spend a moment to just breathe, right? Then we're going to be moving forward. So I'm not sure, I can't see myself on the screen, so I'm not sure if you can see my shirt, but it says move forward, right? So for anyone that's in our AMP program, okay, Marta, thank you so much. You said you see my shirt. For anyone that's in the AMP program or any of our programs, can I just see some move forwards in the chat? I would love to see some move forwards in the chat. Move forward is exactly what it seems like it means. So many of us have been in a meeting where we said, moving forward, such and such and such. How do we move forward from here, right? And that was a lot of Biden's speech today. How do we move forward? Let's talk about unity. So we're going to be moving forward alongside one another today. And then we're continuing to think about the YW's theme for this year that Paige has already shared with us, the year of now. So new opportunities and wins. What are the new opportunities that are rising today, and what are some of our wins? Now, I'm going to quickly introduce and share a light introduction of our panelists that we are so grateful for you to be joining us today. So on our panel, sorry, I'll move you over again. We have the Honorable Letitia James, the Attorney General of the state of New York, and the first woman of color to hold a statewide office in New York City, and the first woman to be elected as Attorney General. So we are continuing our wins today, surely. Nicole Smith Futrell, is the Associate Professor and Supervising Attorney at the Criminal Defense Clinic. Nicole has spent over 10 years working as an advocate for the rights of indigent people accused of crimes. Then we have Councilmember Vanessa Gibson, who proudly represents the 16th Council District in the Bronx. She is a voice for the West Bronx at City Hall and advocates for affordable housing. Let me list them: affordable housing, low-income families, seniors, LGBTQ plus rights, gender equity, and employment access, and meaningful opportunities for youth. And finally, but not finally, because we have 3 more panelists that we'll be talking about, is Yu Ru Chu, who is the Chief Affirmative Litigation for the Environmental Protection Bureau, located at the Attorney General Social Justice Division. On the next slide, we're going into more of our panelists, and these panelists are youth leaders. So these are our youth social change agents that have been a part of YW programming. Okay, we have Shiaka, who's an 11th grader born and raised in New York City. Shiaka is Grenadian and Trinidadian and Nigerian descent. And she's been a part of the YW Step In and Step Out program, or Step In and Stop It program. Safira. Safira is a part of the AMP program. I know Safira. She's also a senior at the York Preparatory School in Midtown Manhattan. Safira has participated in several YW programs, including the STEM program, the Social Justice program, and the Bystander Intervention program. And then we have Grace. Grace, you're actually on the screen. I'm looking at your face. So hello, Grace. Grace is a senior at Beacon High School and also a member of New York City's, of the YW New York City Step In and Stop It program, and has been a part of multiple programs at the YW. So one more time, can we just see welcome? Let's just see welcome. Instead of my move forward, let's see some welcomes in the chat, right? So we are welcoming all of our panelists that we'll be hearing from today. And in this moment, I'd like to pass it off to Siobhan before we get started to do some breath work for us.
Thank you so much, Jaleesa. It is such a pleasure to be here with everyone. As Jaleesa said, I am the program coordinator at Girls Initiatives alongside Van Page, who's the senior director. And today we're going to do some breath work, a small breath work exercise. As we learned this year and last year, breathing is a birthright. It is not just a graceful thing. It is actually a birthright, the ability to be able to breathe. And as we do this, I'm going to have my hands here and I'm going to move my hand up. And when I move my hand up, you're going to inhale deeply. We're going to inhale everything positive that we've accepted for today. And when we exhale at a 6-second count, we're going to release everything that was negative, everything that held us back in 2020. We're not taking that with us on this new journey, and we're not taking it with us in this new presidency. Are you ready? I think you guys can put move forward in the chat. I think that's the theme that Jaleesa wants us to say today. So if you can, once I see 3 move forwards in the chat, I'll be ready. 1, 2, 1 more. Okay, there we go. So we're gonna inhale deeply. I want you to absorb everything positive that you wanna walk into this week with, this year with, the next 4 years with. Breathing in deeply with 6-second count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold it. Hold all of those precious moments. Hold all of the things that you're willing to take with you, all of the things that are guiding you into this next chapter. And we're going to hold for 6 seconds again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And at that, we're going to begin to release, letting go of all of the toxicity, all of the tension of the last few weeks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Thank you so much, Jaleesa. Reminding ourselves that breathing is a birthright.
Whew, I feel relaxed. So now it's time for us to get started. We are going to be experiencing our panel in 3 parts. The first part is going to be understanding your journey. So we want to understand how you actually got to this space. Then part 2 is experiencing the inauguration. Let's talk about the inauguration. That's why we're all here today. And then the third part is going to be moving forward and discovering new opportunities and wins, right? So that theme that we discussed earlier. So the first question, which any of the panelists can answer, is tell us about your journey to becoming the leader that you all are today, or an agent of social change.
I'll go ahead. Oh, sorry.
I'm just a sister from Brooklyn who obviously wanted to make a difference because there weren't a lot of people of color, a lot of women who look like me. I walked into a courtroom one day when my family member got in trouble. I was a young lady at the time. Everyone in the courtroom did not look like me. The only people who looked like me were the defendants, the court officers, the judges. everyone in a position of power did not look like me. They told my mom and all the mothers in the courtroom to sit down and shut up. And I vowed at that point in time that I would never allow any mother or grandmother or any woman who looked like me to be respected by a court officer. I went to law school. I read a book called Simple Justice. I wanted to walk the halls of Howard University, which dismantled legal segregation in this country. I became a public defender, then ran for office on a third-party line, representing Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, Prospect Heights, Crown Heights, and a little bit of Bed-Stuy for 10 years. Challenged a major developer over the Barclays Arena because there were homes there where that arena now stands of poor people, and they moved them out of the way to build a basketball arena, and I opposed it all the way to the United States Supreme Court, along with my community. Then wanted to run for citywide office because no other Black woman had ever done that, and decided why not, and won as the public advocate, the first Black woman to run citywide. And then there was an opportunity to run for statewide office because there never had been a Black woman who had won for statewide office, and I did. And now I am the Attorney General of the state of New York. Why? Because it was necessary. Why? Because there's nothing special about me. Why? Because all of you can basically do the same thing. You've got to dare to be different. You've got to stand up. You've got to embrace your power, recognize where you come from and who you represent, and recognize that the law is both a sword and a shield to represent those who are invisible. And that's why each and every day for the last 2 years, I've stood up and I've sued the Trump administration. And now it's over.
Wow, thank you so much for that. That was powerful. And Grace she has her hand up and she's clapping for you. So Grace, go ahead.
Thank you.
Oh, I don't know how to follow that. Thank you. That was very moving. Yeah, I'm definitely at a much lower point than that. Obviously, I'm 17. Where do I start? Okay. So I think that I've never really started my journey on social justice. I've kind of always been on the same path. I've been raised by very liberal parents who came from very traditional households and wanted to break that pattern. And I've grown up in an area that was very close-minded, I would say, to change, a wealthy area, and the wealthy are, again, have a little bit of tunnel vision. And I remember just having elementary school experiences and middle school experiences where I would see boys treating girls so horribly, and I never understood it. And I never understood why girls didn't want to stand up for themselves. I never understood why I would get made fun of for standing up for those people or for myself. And I think I just got tired of trying to convince boys that they were in the wrong, because I've gotten to this point where I think just being a woman, being a feminist, there's so many people who will place their biases there and refuse to look past them no matter what. So I definitely was looking for a space where I could be surrounded by people who wanted, advance us in the same direction. And pretty much the only thing I could think of is a group of girls and no boys. So that's kind of how I found Girls Initiative, and Step In and Stop It has been so powerful and like one of my favorite things to do because I think everybody is so open to making change and being the generation that actually lives up to this reputation that we've created for ourselves. So yeah, I think that's kind of how I got here, is wanting to be in a place where people accept my voice. And yeah, so this is just the beginning, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
It is certainly just the beginning at 17. So thank you, Grace. Who else wants to share? We'd like to hear from everyone to hear about your journey to this day.
Hi, I'm happy to jump in, and I'll just start by saying I'm so delighted to be here with everyone and to see all of your faces. I get so much energy and inspiration just from this gathering, and all the sort of energy and sentiments that you bring to it, and to also be in the space with Attorney General James, someone who I have admired from afar and admire your work, and your story resonates so much with me. Not that we have the same stories, but just that idea of being in a space where you don't see many people who look like you look, and wanting more for yourself, and wanting to help fight for your people. And so for me, my story really starts as being the child of immigrants, which I'm assuming many of you might have an experience like that, where my parents came to this country from Barbados, from the islands, with the idea that there would be more opportunity and more hope and progress for their kids. And really instilled in us just that kind of value of education and learning and striving, but also a value of service. The idea that we are indebted to all the people who came before us, and all the people who are around us who are not able to do well, or to push or strive, and we have to help kind of bring everybody up. And so that was really sort of a core value that my parents instilled in me, that has stayed with me and has helped move my path along. And I think, similarly, I think it's those childhood experiences. As a child, I had an uncle who was killed by the police, and I didn't really understand what it was all about. I think my family as immigrants didn't really feel like they had a place to ask too many questions or to push back, and didn't have a voice. And although at that time, I can't say that was the thing that at that moment I was like, I'm going to become a lawyer. I think it just planted a seed in me that that I knew that people of color, Black people, are treated differently in this country. Immigrants are treated differently in this country. And that we really have to be able to represent ourselves and stand up for ourselves. And I think that kind of pushed along my trajectory. I didn't really know I knew I wanted to be in service to other people, but I didn't really know what that service could look like. My dad was a teacher in Barbados, my mom was a nurse. And so, that kind of, I knew I didn't like those ideas so much. And I think my parents always said, you talk a lot, you argue a lot, like you have such an opinion, you should be a lawyer, and always putting that thing in my head. And so eventually I found myself in law school. And, through that experience of just being in law school, not feeling like I belonged there at all, but still just pushing through it and finding people, like-minded people and opportunities, I fell into a space of doing a clinic, which is sort of practical legal work, where I was representing people who had just been arrested, and actually getting to stand up and fight for them in court. And I always thought of myself as sort of a shy person. And all of a sudden there was this side that just came out when I wasn't talking about myself, but I was fighting for somebody else. And so that really pushed me into becoming a public defender, at the Bronx Defenders. And then, finding myself along the path where now I am teaching. I'm teaching people who are law students who want to go into practice to represent people, how to do that. And I really view it as, a kind of full circle of, I had the opportunity to do. I see people who have that passion, and I want to help prepare them, to get them ready to go out and get people out of prisons, to decarcerate our prisons, to give people, fair and just and strong representation in court. And I really view it all as part and parcel of, Black liberation. That's what it is to me. And so that's just a little bit about my path. And I think, for many of you, I'm hearing that sentiment of social justice and wanting to help your community and build people up, and seeing something that's wrong that you want to right. And I think let that momentum kind of continue to fuel you and move you forward. And there's a lot you can do with that.
Nicole, you have us moving forward. It seems like we're going from adult leaders to youth leaders. So Safira or Chiaka?
Hi, I'll go. Hi, I'm a senior. My name is Safira Motin. I go to York Prep, and I have always been closely related to the YW. Thankfully, it was kind of one of my safe spaces. So I agree with Grace. I do like an all girls environment only because you see women like being experts in their own field and like not being talked down to or having things explained to them. And I'm surrounded by other women who are just as passionate and as fierce as, you know, how I want to be. And not only does it like help women become the best versions of themselves, it just makes someone who is not so passive into like more of an outspoken person. So personally, I have dealt with issues like being way too shy in my environment. I go to a predominantly white school because I go to a private school on the Upper West Side. So I have noticed that because I am so different, I don't really feel like I have a voice in my school. And you know, I don't really represent my school. So I guess at the YW, I'm able to express my opinions on things and just like have the passion and drive to be able to talk about the things that matter to me. But the people who went before me are people that I really do look up to. You know, attorneys and lawyers and just in general, people who care about these things and want to do something in that field to help others and help people who look like them. And they make a huge influence in other people's lives. And that's kind of a direction that I want to follow in, even though I'm like still trying to figure things out. It's still trying to, I'm trying to go for that.
Thank you. You're in the right space. Who can we ask for next? Yuru Chu. Are you?
So like the two other lawyers who have already spoken here, and by the way, I'm the chief of affirmative litigation in Tish's office, the Environmental Protection Bureau. So we are well represented here today, as is, I think, Clinton Hill, even more specifically. So I went to law school with the idea of becoming a public interest lawyer. And like Nicole and Tish, I also started out at the Legal Aid Society, although I started out on the civil side, defending primarily women who are on welfare who are being evicted from their homes. And I then went on to the NYCO Reproductive Rights Project. So I used to tell people that I was a professional feminist because that's what I got paid to do. And then after a brief stint at a law firm to pay off my student loans, I ended up at the Attorney General's office, where I've been for many years. And I think that my interest in public interest law probably came from an experience kind of like yours, Safira, which is that I grew up in a primarily white suburb. In my elementary school and high school, there were fewer than 10 Asian American kids. Like Nicole, my parents were immigrants. They spoke English with an accent. And I remember getting certain spelling words or getting words wrong on a spelling test because I pronounced the words the way my parents did with an accent, and I sounded the words out. And so I wrote them down incorrectly because my parents mispronounced them. But being one of very few Asian kids in a part of New Jersey, which I later found had some KKK influence, I was bullied a lot. You know, I got beat up, kids picked on me a lot in school. I don't know if getting good grades added to that or not, but I was one of very few people who looked like me, and I got bullied a lot. And I think that is what ultimately, or is what has led to my desire to fight for, you know, the underdog, you know, women who are getting welfare and might be evicted, you know, women who are being deprived of the right to choose, access to contraception, things like that.
Thank you so much. I didn't realize you were in the same office. Thank you so much for making that connection. And finally, we have Councilmember Vanessa. Would you be willing to share your story and your journey to becoming the leader that you are today?
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. What an exciting and historic day in history. I am so proud to see the ascension of our new Vice President, Kamala Harris. It's an honor to be with all of you. It's an honor to stand on so many shoulders of incredible women. My big sister, our New York State Attorney General, Letitia James, who's on the panel with us. We are just so proud, and it just reminds us that we still have much further to go. Women of color are breaking that ceiling all across the country and representing women and girls and all of the issues that affect women and families across this country, but we know we have much further to go. I am a council member today. I represent District 16 in the Bronx. I'm in my second and final term in the city council, and I am also a candidate running to become the next Bronx Borough President. I am excited about this incredible opportunity. The Bronx has never elected an African American nor a female candidate to Borough Hall, so I'm excited to be a woman of color running for office such a time as this. Previous to my work in the city council, I was a New York State Assembly member for 4 years, and I got my start as an intern back in 2001 as a student at the University at Albany, when I became an intern in the intern program, and I was able to work with an incredible woman who would become a mentor and a second mother to me, named Aurelia Green. She served in the state assembly for 27 years, and I was able to learn under her leadership. She became a mentor. She took me by the hand. She allowed me a space to grow. She helped me develop a lot of my strengths, identify weaknesses, and she really molded me into the woman and the public servant I am today. Every little girl needs a mentor. Every little boy needs a mentor in their lives. Everyone needs someone to look up to realize that sometimes we doubt ourselves, but we have to be the biggest champions. We have to recognize that we are destined for success. We have a fundamental purpose in life, and it is up to all of us to be the change agents that are necessary for change in this country and in our community. And now that I'm in my last year in the city council, I am also the co-chair of the city council's Women's Caucus, the 13 elected women out of the 51 members of the city council. So we are champions for issues that affect women's health care, maternal morbidity and infant mortality, supporting a woman's right to choose, fighting with our trans brothers and sisters to make sure that they get the support they need, all of the issues around equity and gender parity and pay parity. We've been standing in the trenches with many of you. So I'm excited about today's conversation. And if I could just give a bit of advice to anyone out there that's watching, any little girl that doesn't see themselves beyond their neighborhood, I want you to stand in your purpose and know that you have something to give back to this country. No matter what it is, you are good at something and you have a purpose in life. And it is up to all of us to support you, but we also want to encourage you and motivate you that you can be successful. We now have someone in the White House that looks just like us. And it is an opportunity for all of our little girls all across the country to dream big and dare to hope that even despite it all, you are destined for success. So I look forward to today's conversation, and to all of my sisters on the panel, it's great to be with you, and let's continue to do this work together. Girl power. Yes.
I see some claps happening. That is the energy that I had when I woke up this morning, okay? That was literally my energy. Thank you, Councilmember Vanessa Gibson. So now we're moving over to part 2. So we've heard everyone's story. How did you get to this point of your leadership role today? Now we're moving over to part 2, which is understanding the inauguration. So we can't do that without talking about what happened last week. So just a week before the inauguration, we saw hundreds of people who stormed the Capitol building. What are your thoughts about the invasion of the U.S. Capitol?
So, you know, we all witnessed today President Biden and Vice President Harris take the oath of office, an oath of office to protect this country against enemies, both foreign and domestic. And then on January 6th, we saw a president who unfortunately engaged in basically incitement and inciting those who engage in basically an insurrection against us in a symbol of our democracy in the Capitol. And our system of government may not be perfect, but we will not allow those who are fueled by hate, by conspiracy theories, by lies, basically to attempt to overturn and overcome our government. And so all of us need to stand up, and those who were responsible need to be held accountable, including those who aided and abetted those individuals who engaged in this attempted insurrection. And so if we can identify those individuals, they need to be brought to justice. And those members of Congress who the day before took on a tour, a reconnaissance tour, individuals who basically they showed them the layout of the Capitol. They too are responsible, and they too should be held accountable. I'm proud to see Joe Biden and Kamala Harris sworn in today, because it reminds me of the fact that all of us are in this together. And what we've got to do is continue to talk about facts and truth. And we've got to, again, bind this nation and heal this nation and appeal to our better angels. And we've got to stand together with no space between us against white supremacists and those who would divide us. We are now divided more than we've ever been in this country. And that cannot be. We've got to heal the breach. We've got to come together. But we also have to remember all of those who've been impacted by COVID-19, because it has revealed the racial fault lines in this country. We've got to talk about the economics. We've got to talk about gender inequality and the feminization of poverty. And we've got to talk about the new economy, and we cannot return to normal. No, we got to rebrand our economy and make sure all of us are included, particularly women with children. And so that's why I'm proud today. And that's why I'm going to make sure that I work with all of those individuals, and particularly the Department of Justice, to hold those individuals responsible for an attempt for insurrection and an attempt to overthrow our democracy. It was disgraceful, and I'll do everything in my power to hold them accountable. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. What are the feelings of others? Right, that pretty much summed it up for me. But what do others feel? What are your thoughts about the invasion of the U.S. Capitol?
Well, I think that in addition to all of the other racial fault lines that the pandemic has exposed, it's also exposed a huge difference between how quote unquote protesters are treated depending on who they are, what they're protesting, what their color is. Right here in my neighborhood over the summer, we saw incredible police presence over the BLM protests. I remember going down to downtown Brooklyn one day, and there was no protest going on. Nothing had started yet, but even beforehand, there were dozens and dozens of police officers lining Cadman Plaza in front of the Brooklyn Bridge, dozens of police vans, all getting ready for what they were anticipating. And there was nothing like that at the Capitol, nothing. Just 1 block away from me, the police kettled protesters, peaceful protesters. Had it been 1 block over, we probably would have been like letting people in the gate and handing them water or something. I think it really, one of the most devastating racial fault lines in society was definitely revealed that day. And these people, as everyone knows, they were armed. They had been on a reconnaissance mission. And that also, I think, people have to be held accountable for that as well.
I agree. And I think that everything has happened by design and for a reason. And, there's a learning lesson in everything that we see in society. But understand that this last administration, 4 years of divisiveness, of rhetoric, of conspiracy theories around a presidential election, were led by the commander-in-chief. So we know that in America, racism is alive and well, and we, people of color, have been dealing with it for 401 years. And so to me, this was racism in its truest form, with white supremacists that were incited by a president that spoke the same rhetoric that they fundamentally believe in. And so to me, I wasn't surprised. I was very saddened to see it happen, to see the breach of security. When I saw individuals scaling walls and breaking into offices, putting their feet on desks, stealing podiums. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? You have never seen that behavior at any Black Lives Matter demonstration. And it's true, we're all treated differently just based on what we look like and the color of our skin. And so to me, like many of us, we were not surprised, but just saddened because it reminded us of the administration that we have been dealing with for 4 years. And sadly, we believe obviously a lot of inside knowledge and inside in terms of the work and allowing these individuals to get so close into the US Capitol, that would never happen. I mean, many of us, when it was unfolding, you know, we kept saying, well, what would happen if those supremacists were African American? Well, let's be honest, many of them may not be alive to tell the story. They wouldn't have made it out of the Capitol. And that's a realization that we face every day in our work. And so while we're not surprised, we're saddened, we should be really upset, but more determined now than ever before with this new administration to get things done and to change the environment by which we work. An attack on our democracy is an attack on our values and everything we fundamentally believe in. And though they may think that they won, they did not win. We did not overturn the election. We moved forward with affirming the Electoral College's results, and everything that we believe would happen moved forward. And so to me, they're the biggest losers, not us. And it means that we have to keep moving forward because there are a lot of non-believers out there that don't see this new administration working on their behalf. And so that's up to all of us to work with the new administration in our local communities and get things done so that we don't have these breaches and these attacks and assaults on our democracy.
Well, I'll say something quickly. Firstly, I have to apologize for my setting because I had a doctor's appointment. And so right now I'm in the car participating in this panel and also, you know, being in a vehicle. So it's not maybe the most attractive background, but I just found it really interesting. I kind of came in and I apologize. I don't remember the person who said it, but when the person said how, you know, what if the insurrectionists were African American or what if they weren't just white people and they had guns? And it reminded me of how these were Black people with guns, but they didn't use it in a violent way. They were actually, the Black Panther movement was an organization that was trying to improve the neighborhoods. And it was kind of like a grassroots campaign trying to improve the lives of the Black people around them. And yet they were so threatening to the FBI or the CIA or whoever. They were very threatening to the federal government. And so then the government actually took many steps to disrupt the community and break them apart, just because of, like, if you look at the image of African American people with firearms, that scares people enough. And so that's what it made me think of, because I feel like none of this would have ever happened if you heard of, you know, Black people and other people of color talking about, you know, taking up arms and trying to break into the Capitol. That they would have never been successful. And so I think that really should highlight, these aren't new problems. We've had them since the beginning of this country. And so I think it should just highlight the issues and really underline it further for people who don't fully understand it yet, because I think a lot of us already knew about it. So I think that this can maybe help encourage new growth so that everyone really understands and is on the same page.
Yes, thank you for sharing. And also, it's a virtual world right now. We're facing 2 pandemics, so we don't care about your background, all right? We're just happy that you were able to join us. And I'm hearing a lot of emotions. So I'm hearing a lot of emotions in your voices, some positive rage. I'm saying positive rage because of the stereotypes of rage for women of color that are on the stage, right? So I'm hearing rage. There's a lot of vulnerability. What were the emotions that you felt? So if you can go back to last week, those emotions hopefully are very different than today. But what were some of the emotions that you remember feeling? What do you remember going through your mind as you were looking at social media, looking at your preferred news station, and receiving the information about the Capitol storming last week?
I think the whole thing was just very frustrating and upsetting. I did have a lot of discussions about this in my class, and I had a lot of discussions about this with people who are generally conservative, because I do surround myself with conservative people, whether I like it or not. But these were the same people that continuously just complained about Black Lives Matter riots, and they were just like, it's taking up space in the streets, it's going against the police that's supposed to protect us, it's an attack on democracy, as if everything that happened last week wasn't an attack on democracy. Like, these are the same people who, you know, believe in America, are very patriotic, and are just like, they show their patriotism. But it's when all of a sudden their president doesn't get elected for a second term, they throw a temper tantrum and decide to react in a way that is like ridiculous and overblown. And it's just it is so hypocritical. And having to argue with these kind of people, it's hard to get through to them, because somehow it's in their head, it's justified. But for some reason, Black Lives Matter, which is actively fighting against racism, is not justifiable. So it's interesting.
Thanks for that, Safira. It's literally two different truths. Nicole, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess I felt, similar to what folks have expressed, not being, I wasn't shocked, but it's still surprising, where it's like, wow, they took it there, they took it all the way there, right? Those sentiments were brewing. And I think, in a lot of the ways that they were caught off guard, or if they were or weren't, was that they thought with folks, supporting Trump, that there was a limit to that they wouldn't breach a certain limit, right? And so when they breached that limit, it was like, oh, we never thought that would even be possible, right? For me, the emotion I felt, as a mom, was like, how do I even, explain this? Like, kids who are learning about, my little kids who are learning about the democratic process, and, being a good loser, like, if you lose, like, you accept it and you move on, and, like, what's appropriate behavior. All of that has been really hard to explain. And I think even in the backdrop of, the summer, and participating in some of the BLM protests, and then really seeing how folks have talked about that difference in the way that folks were treated, how do you even begin to, there is an explanation for it, but it's not one that you can break down to kids, without a lot of pain and challenge. And so for me, I felt a lot of suffering behind that, because, I think it's just, it's so impossible to explain. It's so painful to explain. And yet, I'm still trying to instill this hope and this, this faith that things will continue to, move forward and improve. And I mean, the inauguration today, at least for my kids, I had to sit them down and say, watch it, right? So you can see, at least you saw what happened last week. And then despite that happening, we were still able to have, this process happen outdoors and proceed how it should, and have, Kamala Harris sworn in as our first, Black Asian woman VP. Like, you need to see that, and they kept even remarking, well, I'm surprised nothing happened. Like, they were really waiting for something to happen, And so for me, just all of the emotion of that was just a lot of pain and disappointment, even though, in many ways it's expected deep down inside.
I just also want to make the point that, equating the Black Lives Matter protest to what happened at the Capitol is a false equivalency, because there's a very big difference between legitimate First Amendment protected protest, which every American is guaranteed under the First Amendment, and what happened at the Capitol, which involved crime. These people were armed. They did not listen to the police, who told them to step back or back down. They grabbed the police's riot shield. They broke windows. They stormed into the Capitol. That's not protest. That's criminal behavior.
Can I also say, let's go back. Let's go back to the day that President Trump announced his candidacy. Let's go back to the attacks on President Obama, the birtherism campaign. Let's go back to his attacks on Mexicans, the Muslim ban, the Chinese virus, the separation of children and undocumented immigrants at the border. The fact that in New York, and under, again, with Ms. Yao's support, in New York, we filed 76 lawsuits against the Trump administration in the last 2 years, and 6 just yesterday. Not because we disagree, we don't like President Trump. It's because, one, he designated New York City as an anarchist jurisdiction, which unfortunately did not allow us to get money. He capped the amount of money we can deduct from our taxes. He basically said you have to have a citizenship question on the census. He basically said that undocumented immigrants should not be included in the census for the purposes of reapportionment. He banned us from the travel ban so that we could not travel seamlessly through the airports. The list goes on. He attacked the air that we breathe, clean energy, a clean environment, clean water, reproductive rights. The list goes on and on and on and on. Not because we disagree with his politics, it's because he attacked our democracy and our fundamental values, and because of his racial animus against people of color and immigrants. What he stands for is totally inconsistent with everything that we believe in. And so what we wanted and what we needed was a decent president. And Black Lives Matter, for the most part, again, is about aggressive policing and the murder and death of countless number of people of color who have done absolutely nothing wrong. That's the distinction. It's about law and order.
Thank you for that. Our Attorney General is forcing me to shift gears in a great way. So originally I said that we were going to go into, let's talk about today, right? But today's inaugural speech was focused on unity. And I think we should actually end with that idea of unity, right? And talking about those strategies. So some of the other questions about moving forward and new opportunities and wins is really focused on strategy. And it's about us putting our minds together and thinking about what do we hope for and what are we looking forward to from the Biden and Harris administration. So the first question is, what could the Biden and Harris administration mean for the fight against systemic racism and oppression? And you may say it doesn't mean anything, or you may say it means all these things, and here's what I'm looking forward to, but we would really love to hear from you.
So I look forward to working with the Biden administration on police reform, right? On reforming police departments all across this country. You know, when you talk about Black Lives Matter, implementing policies that in fact demonstrate that Black lives in fact do matter. So that we have body-worn cameras in police departments all across this country, that we have use of force standards all across this country, that police officers are held accountable all across this country, that police officers are even in most of the situations, like they did in Chicago most recently, they're certifying police, or in New Jersey, they're giving them licenses. We can do more here in the state of New York, but we also can do more across this country. And so there is a bill that's currently pending in Congress and the United States Senate in honor of John Lewis, and in honor of Mr. Floyd, George Floyd, and in honor of all of those individuals who have lost their lives at the hands of police. I look forward to working with the Biden administration to pass it into law. And let me just also say that the person who was the star today was the poet laureate, yes, Amanda Gorman. She was the star. And basically what she said is she's calling on us to leave behind a country better than the one that we left. And let us continue to rebuild and to reconcile. She was the star of the hour. Let us remember her words and her speech, and let us continue not only to live out her words, but also to think that this past weekend we celebrated Dr. King, and we must always continue to believe in that spirit of peace, in the fight for equality, and the fight for freedom, and the fight for simple and sweet justice.
Councilmember Gibson.
That was amazing. I just love following the Attorney General. And yes, ditto to everything that she has said. And I also want to mention a very big topic when you talk about oppression, poverty, income inequality that we have not yet dealt with right here in New York State, in the city of New York. Stagnant wages, voting rights, right, suppression, right, union busting, not supporting union jobs. I mean, right now we have hundreds of Teamsters in Hunts Point that are on strike because they're fighting for, guess what, $1 increase an hour, $1, and their employers offer them 32 cents. That is the reality of what many Americans are dealing with, and we have to get people back to work. So many residents have lost their jobs, their incomes, fallen behind rent and mortgage payments, and are struggling for basic necessities. This administration has to have a real comprehensive jobs plan. We have to get Americans back to work, but we also have to look at new places where we can create industries that build on jobs, like worker cooperatives, like the tech industry. We have to look at creating new jobs that we're not necessarily oriented with. And we have to build on a platform to incorporate young people, internships, like I was an intern years ago, working with high schools and colleges, both public and private, HBCUs, having a real plan to deal with income inequality. Gender parity is something that we continuously fight every single day. And you saw the announcement by the president of this new council that's going to focus on gender issues, because we have to realize, as Black and brown women, we make far less than our white male counterparts for doing the same work. Equal pay for equal work. So these are things that we fundamentally believe are flawed in the system, and we are going to be working with this administration. A lot of these things, remember, are systemic. They are embedded in the system for a reason, and they are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. That's why we, all of the electeds and advocates and young people, have to break down these silos and these barriers, because a lot of these things have been in place for 401 years. Nothing is different. And so now that the hands have changed in the White House and we have a new administration, we're going to be counting on them to really elevate these issues to the very top of the agenda, because the way that you get to the pathway to the middle class and working Americans is by creating jobs and getting people back to work. So I think that's a huge part when you talk about criminal justice reform, when you talk about oppressed, marginalized people, you have to talk about income inequality as well.
If I can just jump in and say, for me, you know, mass incarceration and mass criminalization, it took us, you know, a long time to get where we are. It wasn't a purely Republican, you know, sentiment that got us to the position we are, where there are so many Black people who are in prison, who are under supervision, community control, you know, and I think even in the election cycle, many people called into question, you know, President Biden and VP Harris's own roles in getting to the place that we are. And so now that they are in these, they were in different seats before, but now that they are in these seats and, you know, they have, I hope, a better awareness of where we are right now, for me, I would really like to see a deep commitment to rolling back and undoing so much of the harm that's been created by mass incarceration and mass criminalization. I think, you know, some of the ways that they can do that are, you know, some very simple ways. In the clinic in my law school, we work on clemency cases quite a bit, right? Which is, you know, they have the power with the stroke of a pen, right? As we know, Trump exercised his pardon power very vigorously to, you know, let people out, right? And so President Obama had an initiative towards the end of his time in office. And I think it would be really important to bring that back and to really look at how we can use our clemency and pardon powers to get people out of prison. And, you know, I think some of the easy cases are the nonviolent offenders, but even people who are charged with so-called violent offenses, those are some of the things that we have to look at too and have hard conversations around, because it's not nonviolence alone that's going to get people out of prison and get us to the point of decarceration. I think, looking at where we spend our money, our federal money, so much has gone into building up police departments, building up corrections departments, and so what if we reallocate some of those funds, right? So are there ways to invest more in housing, in education, in healthcare, all the things that we know are going to help build up communities and keep people out of prisons, right? And so I would like to see a real movement towards that. The last thing I would say is the death penalty, right? And the federal death penalty. I think we saw in the last few months here how Trump really accelerated the use of the death penalty. And I think that's an area that the Biden-Harris administration could really try to push and, take some of the lead on. We're behind other countries in the fact that we still use the death penalty. And I think that's an area that we could really use some progress on. And so those are, I think they just have to acknowledge, which they have in a lot of ways, how their former roles fed into where we are now. So what are they going to do to dismantle some of that?
Grace, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think something that I'm really excited for is to see how, again, like I've said before, how my generation and how the youth really explodes now in a really positive way, because for the last 4 years, I just remember feeling, incredibly trapped and incredibly voiceless when I heard my president talking about, sexually assaulting young girls or any kind of women, and the sheer amount of accusations against him alone, and how none of it affected his power or even how he viewed it. You hear all the time about how when people get accused, you ruin their lives, and like he was not even fazed by any of these words. And today, sitting there watching Kamala get sworn in and feeling so much more hopeful to see that, I had conversations with the women, the people of color, the women of color at my school who just didn't want to speak for the last 4 years because it felt so useless. And because again, like the influence that we saw and the person that got through to too many people was such a toxic white old man. And now I just think that there will be so much more progress, and I feel so much more inclined to get involved, and I know so many other people do, because there's proof now. There's proof that it works. There's proof that you can get there. It's hard, and it's certainly not over, and there's so much that still needs to be done, and we still really need to hold this administration accountable. But it's just the first step in a generation of cis white males whose priorities have always been themselves. And now we're seeing that the priority is the country as a whole. And it's relieving, I think, in a way. So, yeah.
Grace, thank you so much for that. Right away, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about when you said the influence, right? The influence that the former president was able to have over such a large group of people. And in Biden's inaugural speech, he mentioned being able to decipher between truth and lies. So when I heard it, I was like, yeah, that'd be great because, oh man, when there was a thing on social media going around about fake news, I'm like, there's so much going on, and it's like a disbelief. And now privilege is not something that marginalized identities receive. Like it's against marginalized identities. And I've seen reports, and I've seen these are full beliefs that a large group of people, thousands of people have, right? But Biden's hope is to be able to decipher between truth and lies. So I would love to hear from the panelists. Safira, Shiaka, what are some of the setbacks that the Biden and Harris administration may encounter when they're trying to decipher between truth and lies? What are some of those setbacks?
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. So during the inaugural speech, the President Biden mentioned the importance of being able to decipher between truth and lies. So as he's trying to do that, what are some of the setbacks that the Biden-Harris administration may encounter? And anyone can respond, but Safira and Shiaka, we haven't heard your voices in a while.
I'm honestly, okay, so when it comes to setbacks, because Trump has done so much for the country where like he has set the country back, bringing it to a normal standard of any country, just like, it's going to be hard, obviously. I personally do not completely condone Kamala's and Biden's actions, only because like, yes, they are an improvement compared to Trump, but I do believe that they have made many mistakes. But we do have to think about things that Trump has tried or done already. Like, for example, he wanted to create a wall that cost more than he could afford. He tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act. He wanted to get rid of, well, reduce legal immigration, which only promoted illegal immigration, which is like, you know, so obviously you have to like consider all of these things that Trump has done, and in comparison Biden is going to change that, and he's obviously going to make things better. But you know, we are set back as a country because Trump was elected for so long. So I guess right now the most he can do is just like take everything step by step, really. But yeah.
Jalissa, I've got to jump, but I've got representatives here. So Ms. Yu and of course, Councilmember Gibson. But let me just say, remind people, 400,000 people and counting died from COVID-19 as a result of the negligence of President Trump. Let's be reminded of that. And so going forward, what the Biden administration has got to do is we've got to deal with the myths. We've got to be honest and talk about the intersection between race and medical experimentation, which is part of the history of this country. Even to this day, too many women of color die in childbirth. And so in order for the vaccines and to be effective, 75 to 85% of the population has to take these vaccines. And so you need honest and credible messengers to talk facts, to talk about the intersection between race and medical experimentation in this country, and to talk about COVID-19 and the fact that it has disproportionately impacted people of color in this nation. And so you need people to step up. I need my young sisters, my young brothers out there to talk to these young people who think that they're invincible, who refuse to wear a mask. And we've got to confront it head on if we're gonna, you know, come out of this pandemic. And so that's our challenge. And that's the challenge for this administration, to get this vaccination, this plan right, to make sure that there's equitable distribution of the vaccine, that everyone has access to it, that we cover the LGBTQ community, that we cover immigrants, particularly undocumented immigrants, that we not pass on administrative costs to individuals, particularly those who are uninsured and or underinsured. And that, again, we not get back to normal, but we reimagine our economy because we just can't assume that things are gonna fall back to normal. They're not. And so I've got to jump. I apologize, but I've got my able staff member who's doing an excellent job. Give it up to her, Ms. Ruchu, who's filed more lawsuits on behalf of our environment. And to all my young people out there, I'm young in spirit because I know nothing happens without young people. Progress doesn't happen because of elected officials, old people like me. Progress happens not only in this country, but all across this globe because of young people. Remember that. Stand up and take charge and own it. God bless you and thank you.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
That was great. Who wants to comment next?
Tisha's shoes are too big to fill.
That is true, but thank you for speaking. So the question that Attorney General actually did touch on around truth and lies is, as she was talking about the vaccine, what she highlighted was that we need people that we can trust to inform us with the correct information, right, in order to get the pandemic under control. So what are some other things as we're talking about truth and lies? So you can think about some truth and lies that have been said that have really bothered you, and things that we need to correct. And I'd love to hear from any of our panelists.
Well, something that I was thinking about that I think the Biden-Harris administration and many administrations after them I think this is probably a very common thing that's been happening for a long time, but you know, the tides of, I don't know, the political tides, you know, how you may notice a certain pattern of after one administration, you'll get an administration that is very different from that one. And then it may, you know, go back and forth sometimes. And so that is something that I was thinking about, is how much pushback would there be against them, especially in such like a time like this where there's a lot of division. And this actually brought me to another thought, which is the individual the politicians to be wary of, because I've noticed that I don't know if anyone wants to call them this, but I would call them some of Trump's cronies. And you know, there are a lot of politicians, I won't name any names, but I'm thinking of their faces, and I've noticed how, as you know, on like CNN, and how they kept on using that analogy of rats jumping off a sinking ship. And so a lot of these people are still in office, and something I am afraid of is, since Trump is no longer president and now Biden is, people may kind of get too comfortable too quickly instead of pushing and pushing and pushing, while many of these other politicians are still there, and they may aid in kind of like pushing back against progress. And so that's something that I would want this new administration to look out for, is that, hey, sadly, we can take a little breather, but I don't think it's time to relax just yet. So yeah.
Well, I definitely agree with the comment that we can't relax at all, because over 70 million people voted for Trump, and their most violent wing was on display at the Capitol last week. You know, they have clearly been fed a lot of lies, and they believe them very, very deeply, which is the thing I found most frightening about the rioting at the Capitol. And, you know, I don't really know how you get through to people who believe in the QAnon conspiracy theories, or just Trump's own lies about winning the election by a landslide and the fact that it was stolen from him. Who are the trusted messengers who can deliver the truth to them? You know, honestly, I wish I knew the answer to that, but I think unfortunately people live in information bubbles where they consume information that reinforces what they are inclined to believe in anyway. And I'm not sure how you pierce that bubble.
I think we have our marching orders, and so many people have worked so hard to see this day, right? Not just the presidential election, but think about the movement in Georgia to turn Georgia blue with the historic election of both Reverend Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff, who, by the way, would just did their oath of office by our Vice President, Kamala Harris. I just saw it on CNN. And I think there's a lot of expectation that this administration will do better. And yes, we do believe that, but I think it involves all of us as well. I think a lot of us are going to have to be very patient and understanding, because as she said, thousands, millions of people still voted for President Trump, and they still believe that, you know, he should have been the president. And so, as I said, you have a lot of non-believers out there. They are going to stymie progress. They're going to be the barriers that are in place that will deny us the opportunities that we rightfully deserve. And so a lot of work has been done. I mean, kudos to Stacey Abrams, to Keisha Lance Bottoms, to the DNC, to everyone. I had friends in Georgia that were mobilizing. We went to Pennsylvania. We were all over the place just to make sure that people came out to vote. And now that we won, now that we have the Democratic majority in the US Senate and the House, Chuck Schumer is now the majority leader. What are we going to do with it, right? We've done all this work. We've elected the best that we believe can do this job. Now, what are we going to do? And so one of my union leaders here in New York City often says, you have to stay ready so you don't have to get ready. We have to always stay ahead. We have to always, be on point because the work never stops. Today is a day to celebrate. Yes, I realize that. I'm in the moment too. I'm doing my praise dancing. I'm happy. But tomorrow we work, because the minute you let your guard down, boom, that's when things start happening. And so it's going to require all of us, all the issues that we know need to be addressed are going to be addressed, but I think it's going to happen in a very, in a very systemic way. And so people have to be patient. We're now dealing with the vaccine. We have a shortage now in New York and New York City. So I think everything is going to be happening for a reason and by design. And it really is up to all of us. I mean, we've done all this work, so we can't rest now. No time to rest at all. We got to get to work and do what is necessary to deal with income inequality, mass incarceration, criminal justice reform, economic development, affordable housing, healthcare, food insecurity, lots of things that we knew were problems before the pandemic, but now they're further exacerbated, particularly for Americans and New Yorkers of color that have underlying health conditions that we were, just affected by every day. I think a lot of that work remains undone. And if anything, we have to be reunited, re-energized, recommitted, and we have to put our game on, and we have to start and get to work starting tomorrow.
And just to follow up on what Vanessa was saying about there's no time to rest. Stacey Abrams has been working, and other Black women organizers in Georgia has been working for years and years and years. I mean, the efforts that she and the Georgia Democratic Party started, they didn't just start, the day after November, election day this year. She's been there for like a decade. And it has taken, that long and that much work to get to the victories in Georgia last week. But it's also, I think, a vindication that when you do the work and when you put in the work day in and day out, you can achieve results. People didn't think that the Democrats could win 2 runoffs in Georgia. I mean, I had friends who said, well, I just don't think so, because if you add up all the people who didn't vote for Perdue and then Loeffler, it doesn't add up to enough. But they did it.
Thank you so much. This is really bringing back Biden's speech today. He spoke a lot about unity and his theme of unity. So I've been thinking a lot about, can unity be a solution to a lot of the issues that we've been experiencing? At 5:23, I'd like to ask you one closing question, and we'd like to hear from all of our participants, all of our panelists. For anyone that has questions, this is the moment that you can start putting the questions in the chat. Paige and Siobhan will be reading out the questions specifically from our audience. So anyone that has questions, you can put them in the chat, and then we'll be reading them out so the panelists can respond. But panelists, your last question that I would like to ask you today is, it's been stressful. 2020 was stressful. People are saying 2 pandemics. It just feels like the world is turning. This feels like a day that we have a day to celebrate, right? But as Councilmember Vanessa said, you got to stay ready so you don't have to get ready, right? So we're already thinking about strategies. We're already thinking about what's next. The YW is already thinking about programming, right? What are we going to do for the spring? How do we continue to inform youth? How do we create this space of youth and adult leaders and women leaders and women of color coming together, right? So it's been stressful. So I would love to close this out before we have questions from the audience of, what advice would you give to individuals feeling worried about what's to come? Right, everyone doesn't feel super excited. Some people are still nervous. It's been a tough couple of years, and 2020 was extremely exhausting. So if you gave everyone that's listening, and remember we have over 50 people that are on this call today, which means each of those people are going to tell 3 or 4 different individuals about their experience and how great this panel was and everything that they learned and heard, right? And we're all going to be adjusting and taking in that information later on. So what advice would you give to individuals feeling worried about what's to come tomorrow, a month from now, a year from now?
I think the 2 pieces of advice that I would give. First of all, take care of yourself. Siobhan and Paige have always taught us and taken the time to show us that self-care is like the most important thing you could possibly focus on, because it's so easy to get wrapped up in the worry and the hatred that goes on out there. But the reason why we've been so successful, I mean, relatively successful, is because there are so many people who care, and there are so many people who are on the front lines fighting for us and for freedom and for equality and equity and all of those things. And the reason why that works is because we can it's like you can recognize what you need and then also what everybody else needs. So taking self-care. And then the other thing is that I think that there's ways to engage in political conversations or political just topics without, needing to always be talking about the bad parts. I think there's ways to talk about how to advance us without talking about the bad parts. I think my favorite way to do that is reading books or just engaging with creative work on these matters. Toni Morrison, my idol, my family's idol. She manages to write, or managed, sadly, to write so much about the experience of women of color without ever needing to talk about white people and how they struggle, but it's not about us. It's not about anybody else. And I think that when you engage with creative work, it can, shed light on the amazing aspects of all of this work that we're doing. And the reasons why we're doing it is so that people can do what they want to do and everybody can make their own choices. So
I would say to offer up, and I absolutely agree about self-care. I am someone who gives so much of myself to help my district and help everyone else that I don't often take care of myself. And you are no good to anyone else if you don't take care of yourself. So that's number one. The second thing I would say is don't lose hope. Don't lose hope on the possibilities of a better tomorrow. Life presents us with so many challenges. And even in the midst of a storm, when the worst possible things can happen to us as a country, like one of the worst economic crises and global pandemic, 400,000 Americans lost their lives to COVID-19. We have to find a learning lesson in all of that. We have to realize that some of the things that have happened to us during this COVID have strengthened us as individuals. It has allowed us to rethink the way we do things, appreciate life and the preciousness that we have of family, friends, and community. It's been traumatic going through COVID, going to remote funerals. You couldn't even celebrate the life of someone you lost in a proper way. And it's not normal. None of this is ever normal, but it's caused us to rethink the way we do things and really take a better look at life in a different lens. And, so as worse as things can seem, as impossible as things can seem, we have to remain hopeful because there are so many children and young people out there that have lost a lot of hope and they live in isolation. They could be suicidal and they don't see anything happening good in their lives. And sometimes they think about ending their own life. We only get one life. We only get one chance at this thing called life. And we have an opportunity in everything we do to live in the moment. I often say we are here for a reason, a time, and a season. And our season in life has to be meaningful. And it's filled with the trials, the tribulations. I always say the headache, the stomach ache, every ache in the world. But a lot of these things are meant to strengthen you and not break you, especially as women and women of color. We go through things a lot differently than our brothers, and we see the world in a different light. We do things differently in a different style. That's just the way we're ordained. And we have been the homemakers, we've been the head of households, the mothers, the wives, the women, taking care of everything, our children, our families, our spouses, and yet we do it well. And so we have to have our moments where we feel weak, where we feel like we need help, and that's okay. But I think at the end of the day, we have to encourage people to not lose hope, right? Because I think when you lose hope, you lose everything. And we have to believe that things will get better. Yes, we have to believe that things can get better, that we're moving in the right direction. And sometimes I agree, we seem like we take 5 steps forward and 10 steps back, but we have to keep pressing on. We have to keep pushing on for a better tomorrow, not for all of us, but for the next generation of young people that need us and are looking to us. That's what John Lewis and Dr. King and everyone that came before us, C.T. Vivian, all of these great pioneers. Can you imagine if they gave up on the next generation where we would be today? So to me, that's my guiding force and guiding principles. I think about our pillars, Shirley Chisholm and so many that didn't give up on us. And so we can't give up on the next generation. So my recommendation, my advice to everyone is to never lose hope. Be hopeful, be prayerful, and know that better days will lie ahead.
Okay, thank you, council member. Thank you, Grace. Who's next? We want to hear from everyone. What advice do you have? This has been powerful. This may be, I'm like, whoo, this is great. Keep it coming. I'm taking notes.
I don't know that I have so much to add on what's said that is already so powerful, you know, and I think, yeah, self-care, taking care of yourself for sure. And I think, you know, what both Grace and Vanessa have mentioned so far, and, you know, calling out the names of people who have come before us, right? So, you know, John Lewis and Toni Morrison and the folks who, you know, inspire us and have paved the way. For me, I've spent a lot of time, you know, just going back to those folks who are sources of inspiration, right? For me, Audre Lorde is one person that I look to her readings, you know, very frequently. And one line that she has, when I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. And for me, I mean, I have so much anxiety, so much fear, but I think, you know, what I would say to everybody is, it has its place, right? You know, like, have it. I don't deny having the anxiety and the fear is going to exist, right? But the more that you are grounded in your vision, your purpose, that you identify and that you take steps forward to accomplish that vision and that purpose, your fear becomes less and less important. It's there, but it becomes less important. So, you know, I think, you know, honor it, acknowledge it, you know, don't deny it, do whatever you have to do to get through it. But for me, really focusing on what my purpose is, and always just recommitting to my purpose is what helps me get through the fear, and hopefully that will be valuable to someone who's hearing it.
Well, what I did was channel my anxiety into what I thought would be taking positive action, which was both for the general election, volunteering with the Pennsylvania Democrats and reaching out to potential voters, and then going out to Pennsylvania and being a poll monitor. And then after that, volunteering with the Georgia Democrats to do ballot curing, which was really interesting. And just also made me so appreciate and admire Stacey Abrams, who I'm ready to help her get out the vote when she runs for governor again, if she does that, even though I don't live in Georgia, because she is just so amazing and impressive. But that was my way to do it, because even though I have spent the last 4 years suing Donald Trump's environmental policies, as Tish mentioned, you know, there's still extra anger and desire to get him out of office. And so that's how I channeled it. So, but obviously there isn't a national election every year, but I think it is simply, you know, finding a way, big or small, that you can make an impact, be it in your community or on a larger scale, and devoting as much time and energy as you have to that.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else on the panel that wants to share some advice you would give? Okay, Paige, I am passing it off to you to share to bring in your YW advice and to share some more questions for the panelists. Paige, take it away.
Sure. I feel like everything that has already been said is very applicable to my life and just my outlook. But two thoughts, I would say stay grounded, whatever that means to you, if that's connecting with ancestors, if that's connecting with nature, people, animals, whatever you need to stay grounded to who you are and who you're connected to, the places you're connected to. And the last thing would be something I saw earlier, and it was a quote that said, there's honesty and healing. So a part of being grounded, accept what that means for you, and be honest with yourself as we all go through this very lengthy healing process. Okay, so I'm going to open up the space for questions if folks want to add to the chat, and I shall read them. Oh, hi, Abby. Okay, so we have a question from Abby. Abby says, thank you all so much. And the question is for the youth advocates. How should educators be addressing current events in the classroom? The DOE in the past has said that teachers should maintain neutrality around politics, but sometimes remaining neutral doesn't seem to allow for a safe space. Do you think teachers should share their political views?
I can go ahead. This is a question I've been asking myself a lot because my immediate answer would be no neutrality, just share your opinions, because I have so many teachers who just stay silent about it instead of talking about it because they're afraid that they're going to express their true feelings. And I think that that is a little bit naive of me because I know that not all teachers are going to have the same opinions as me. And I don't necessarily want to hear the opinions of those that are different from a teacher, at least. But I think that there's a way to be neutral while also giving space to people who need to talk about it. I think that being in a classroom, especially considering there are so many, from my school, especially in the past couple of weeks, we have heard an uproar from teachers who disagree with how my school does things, which was very surprising because my school is very progressive, very liberal. So getting a lot of disagreement from that, with that is very surprising. So my point is that I think that teachers need to find a way to support what's best for their kids, not necessarily what's best for them. And that doesn't necessarily mean being neutral. It just means giving them a space to talk about it. And again, I don't, surprisingly, like me at a school that is progressive, I don't have a space to talk about this in a classroom. And I know so many people who would feel so much more safe if that were the case. And then again, I would also say that I think that being a conservative or not necessarily being a conservative, but like supporting somebody like Donald Trump stems from fear and ignorance because it's very easy to understand everything he wants. He doesn't exactly use advanced languages. So I'd say most of the teachers I know are open to, a more liberal perspective, and therefore probably would also not, use their own opinions or emotions to, I don't want to say brainwash, I feel like that sounds too harsh, but to like influence or try to skew the children's perspective. But yeah.
I would love to, oh, sorry, is someone else talking? Do you want to go first? Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, I wanted to just ride on Grace's coattails there and add on. I have been thinking about education for maybe a year or so and its importance because I'm a New Yorker. I was born in New York, raised in New York, and I never really questioned the content of the lessons that I was learning. I never really questioned how important education can be and how just a change of like one word, or you put, you know, the period over here instead of over there, how much that can influence people. And something else that I wanted to point to was someone in the comments, Brandon P, how they said that teachers should share facts and allow students to formulate their own opinions and how to express them. And I agree with that. I think that when it comes to the matter of whether or not teachers should express their personal opinions, that's a very difficult question, just because I may want people with opinions similar to me to express themselves, but I also recognize that there are going to be people who have different opinions, and I wouldn't want to say that they can't express themselves because it's going to influence the children. So I'd say to focus on the content of the lesson, but then that has its own challenges, because something I'm noticing is the slight omission of details, the, you know, the little change of tone, or how things are illustrated. Those little things can easily change people's perceptions. And so I've noticed, like, going back and like I've taken government classes and economic classes and history classes, and it's making me realize how much how many things I've learned that aren't quite true, that are close to the truth but not quite, and how much of an effect that can have on people. Everything from Columbus discovered America, to all women were allowed to vote in 1920, to the Emancipation Proclamation released like all people enslaved. All of these things are not quite true, and so, or completely false. And I think it's just, it's an interesting thing, but I think the content of lessons and education is really important. And I think as maybe teachers, if they'd like to express their own opinions, I think what they should do is probably try to examine themselves as individuals, because we're always works in progress. And so they should examine themselves, see what are my biases, what should I, you know, how could that influence my lessons, and maybe try to state the facts as close as possible to what they actually were, even if that goes against your opinions. I know I talked a lot, but yeah, that's what I'm kind of trying to say.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything said, because I think there is a complete difference between influence and complete brainwash. Because obviously, like, you know, trying to stop teachers from talking about their political view, or, you know, talking about politics in the classroom, it's a form of censorship. Like, I think students and teachers should be able to have these discussions without anyone really getting upset. And I do think that teachers should be allowed to talk about their own political stance in class. But I think there's a difference between only presenting information based on their political stance and presenting all of the information, like everything that is needed. And, you know, because of that, I personally do believe that liberal teachers tend to be more educated. Like, it is an actual study. Like, liberal people are just much more educated than like conservative people. And I think because of that, I think we are in a safe enough environment where these teachers are able to present this information without it being problematic. So I guess, yes, they could talk about their political standing, but I think it's more important to give the students the information that they need to create their own political standing.
Thank you all for sharing. So we have a final question from Maureen, our CEO, and the question is for the panel. Is there organizing we can do now to make a difference in New York City with elections ahead in June? And anyone can jump in.
I can start, since I have a big election coming up in June. This June is going to be one of the most important elections for New York City, the election of a new mayor, a new comptroller. The public advocate is running for re-election, and almost 40 members of the 51-member city council, as well as borough presidents in the borough of the Bronx, Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. So we're talking about a major transformation of city government. And there are a lot of folks out there that sometimes don't believe that city government has an impact and influence on your everyday life. And yes, we do. Electing a president is important, but the local government makes sure your trash gets picked up, your park is clean, and your neighborhood is safe and well lit. Those are the things that government can do, the administering of public goods and services. So right now, a couple of things that young people should be doing: mobilizing, whether it's through an organization, voter registration, education, getting as many people registered, just as Stacey Abrams did. Stacey Abrams started working the day she lost that gubernatorial race. She literally started working the next day. And why was she successful? Because she had a plan. You have to have a plan. Whatever you want to get done, you need a plan. And you need to put things in place and people in place to help you with that plan. Coalition building is very important. There are a lot of issues before the city government that we are tackling, but a lot that we have not yet addressed. Income inequality, homelessness crisis, right? Criminal justice reform, police violence, what we're seeing in New York City, public safety, crime is through the roof now because we had a wave of crime last summer. Gun violence, right? So there's a lot of things that are happening that the next administration will be addressing. And so being involved, volunteering, going to the local community boards, which you can join as young as 16. Now, that was a council rule we passed a few years ago. Your local precinct council, so you know what's going on in your particular precinct, getting involved with your community center, your Cornerstone Beacon program. There's so many not-for-profits that are doing work. And obviously, because of the pandemic, a lot of that work has been virtual. But at some point, we hope this year, we will be able to have a lot of in-person events in your local community, finding out who your local elected officials are, talking to them, offering to volunteer. I mean, we always need all hands on deck because we are still in the middle of a pandemic. So we're still giving out PPE, face masks, hand sanitizers. We're encouraging people to get tested. We go to testing sites. We're at the street corner, at the train station, at the subway stop. You know, we're going to places of high visibility because we want to be able to talk to people and meet them where they are. And we could always use young people to help us and interns. And so I encourage you to find out again, the local community board you live in, get involved in that way, join one of your local youth boards. The Neighborhood Advisory Board of DYCD has youth boards in each of the community boards, all 59 in New York City. So you can be involved in that way. But no matter what you do, find a way to get involved. Find a lane that you believe will help you and get in that lane and start working because you are the next generation of leaders and we need all of you to step up and realize the role you play, the value you bring, and most importantly, your voices that need to be at the table. So if anyone, wants to reach out to our office, please do. We are very, very active. I'm trying to figure out how to do all these events virtual because I have a lot of events every year. So it's going to be a little challenging now, but we have a lot of events that are coming up: Black History, Women's History, Dominican Heritage, lots of things where we want to bring people together. And so be on the lookout for that. And any way we can be of help, please let us know.
And, Vanessa, as a council member, I'm sure you can tell me, I think a lot of council members do have youth groups that meet, either more often or less often where high school students can get involved. You can also volunteer to work on a candidate selection, either an incumbent or a challenger. One of my kids is a high school student and she did that over the summer. It was pretty funny, but I won't get into all that. But so you can volunteer to work for a candidate. You can work for a city council member who's already been elected. And if there's a particular issue that you're interested in, I know that the council members are all on various committees, the environmental committee, the education committee. So if there's a particular issue that speaks to you, you could volunteer for a council member who is on one of those committees. I'm sure Vanessa will correct me if I've gotten any of my local government knowledge or information incorrect. And I think if you are 17, you can also volunteer to be a poll worker, which I think is also really important now because the primaries will be in June. Not everyone will have been vaccinated. And certainly if any older people have not been vaccinated yet, it would be better for them not to do poll work. And they are traditionally the people who do that more often. So that's another way you can get involved. And I have run out. That's all I can think of for now.
It's perfect. Perfect. Thank you both for sharing. It sounds like as New Yorkers, it's time to get active and get busy and to continue the work that, you know, we saw get started anew today. So on that note, I'm going to close today's session by thanking you all for joining. Thank you so much to the participants. Thank you so much to our youth change agents for being available today. Thank you so much to Jaleesa. Let's give Jaleesa and everyone a round of applause, virtual round of applause. Normally we either close with like a closing circle in the group chat, or we close with a chant that's a quote by Asada Shakur, and this chant is usually done in call or response, but because we're on the Zooms, I will just leave you with these parting words. And again, this is from Asada Shakur. That's my brother, Brandon. Yes, Asada Shakur, it's called Asada's Prayer, the words that I'll give you now. So it is our duty to fight for our freedom, and it is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. So with that, I bid you all a good night, and thank you all for joining. Stay motivated, stay strong, and stay mobilized. Good night.